meeting. As usual, we'll start with the protocol. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Kilncraigs. This includes council staff from other buildings. There are no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm tests today. If the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. Council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliament Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to the floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshals advise it's safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site of a vehicle until it's cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure access routes are kept clear for any emergency vehicles. Please note that this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during the meeting unless with express permission of the convener. Can members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible? Actually, we've got any this month. If members have not been able to access all papers for this meeting, could you please indicate? Okay, we will hear each of the items set out in the agenda, and I'll invite the officer to present the paper, and members will have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate and decision. Before we move on to that, we've got apologies from Councillor Holden and Councillor Martin this morning. Do you have any other declarations of interest for any items on this morning's agenda? No, okay, thank you. So first of all, we go through the minutes of the meetings from Clackmannanshire Council on the 30th of January and also the 27th of February. We'll go through them page by page and just stop me if there's a correction you want to flag up. Page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, 11, page 12, 13, 14 and 15, 16, 17, page 18. We're happy to approve those minutes? Okay, so the minutes from the meeting on the 27th of February 2025, page 19, page 20, 21, 22, 23, page 24, 25, and page 26, 27. Happy to approve? Okay. Okay, so the first paper this morning is the West Wales Travelling Person Site, the council update, and Murray's going to take us through the paper. Thank you, Murray.
Thanks and good morning, Councillor. Clearly, as members have been made aware through various updates throughout the course of the last financial year, the project has been off-site since last March, which has been extremely disappointing. But most disappointing for obviously the residents who, some of us join us here today, along with their MECOP representative online. We've obviously been supporting them through this journey and keeping them updated at each stage, but clearly they're here today to hear the Council's decision on this paper. Clearly, I think last year when the Paddens went into administration, nobody thought it would take us a year to arrive back at this stage. And perhaps it was only due to the interventions that was outlined in the paper by the Chief Executive that we have arrived here at a fixed price contract to take us forward. As covered in the briefing session the other day, Nicky has requested from the SFT a full report documenting the process that Hubco went through via the last year that's taken us to arrive back at this stage. And hopefully that report will include some interesting reflections on that process. Obviously, the report today includes details of where our discussions have reached in terms of the update, in terms of the price requirements on taking the site forward, the decisions that have been taken in terms of value engineering. Obviously, the report has some decisions today for members, including a decision over the soil displacement on the site and decision over the remaining balance, which is then left over from the previous council agreement of 5.5 million for the site. So the paper outlines the recommendations and the decisions for members. Of course, I'm happy here to take any questions.
Thank you, Murray. Do you have any questions? Councillor Coyne?
Thanks, Convener. Murray, it's my understanding that about £1 million had been spent up to the stage that the project stopped in its tracks. Have we any idea at this stage what residual value there was of that, in other words, money that did not have to be spent in phase 2 with the new contractor? And that would therefore allow us to establish our loss to that point. No details about it, but are we minded to seek recovery of that from some means or other?
So in terms of the value of the grant claim, that's some of the work that myself and Andy have had to look at with finance. We've had to carry out a reconciliation of some of the grant claim down. We are holding, as a council, we are still holding some of that balance ourselves. I think it's about £70,000, give or take, of some of the government grant. There is some, as it was come out in the briefing the other day from Gary from Hubco, I outlined that there is some works on site which have progressed further than perhaps we've paid it. The council solicitor is obviously looking at these matters, and we have discussed those with the Scottish Government as well. What was seen in terms of the agreement we had with the Scottish Government is that we really need to get clarity on this project going forward, and then obviously the council solicitor would then need to review some of those individual matters to then take them forward.
Councillor Pawson?
Thanks, Murray, and thanks for the briefing the other day, which was a good opportunity to kind of go over all the issues. I suppose I'm just looking. Oh, sorry. I'm just looking for some assurances that we are as sure that we can be that this will be the final cost, and that there will be no further delays to moving on with this project and getting people back into their homes.
I'm answering this one. As Gary outlined the other day, the price the price they've negotiated with Ogilvy's, who would be the replacement tier 1 contractor, is a fixed price. That's the work that Hubco put in advance of the contract. The only outlying issue which remains is in the paper, and Gary explained this the other day in terms of an allowance for Scottish Power. Unfortunately, their quote expired just a few days ago, so we have put in an additional allowance of £30,000 above what their previous quote was. So that's the only thing in terms of the variation. But as Gary outlined to the councillors the other day, he feels that we've been very prudent in terms of that allowance. The project timeline has been shared with the Scottish Government, and we'd obviously, if this paper is approved today, share that with the residents tomorrow. It's based on a site start date in early May for completion early April next financial year. So as far as I can give assurance in terms of the work that my colleagues at Hubco have done, they have provided us with the fixed price in terms of all those elements, apart from those two, apart from the Scottish Power I've outlined. As the Chief Executive reminded me, we do actually have to then formally sign off on the contract to work on that price, which I believe Lee has requested to be done within the next 7 to 10 days.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Lee?
Thanks, Chair. 5.3, you talk about value engineering and keeping with consents with council building standards and planning. I'm just looking for a bit of reassurance about how involved building standards and planning have been in this value engineering exercise, because I know obviously they're quite resource poor at the moment, and if they've not necessarily picked up on anything, it could lead to additional cost or alterations down the line.
So in terms of that, I'll probably get Andy if he wants to add something further to that, if he wants to come forward. But in terms of the main aspect, the biggest value engineering exercise, as we went through at the briefing session the other day, was the replacement of the initial specification, unbeknown to me, on my return to service, was that the actual road surface was specified as monoblock. And obviously the change of that to tarmac has been reflected in some of the largest saving, which obviously there's no planning restrictions around the sort of road surface. I wouldn't have chosen monoblock if it was me personally. The other changes related to some sort of ironworks related to some of the doors and some of the fencing, but Andy, do you want to?
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Councillor. I can assure you that building standards and planning will be fully cited on all the changes. There were some items that were discounted on the basis of engagement with building standards and planning, some that were more structural and would have impacted and meant changes to building laws and planning consents, which would have incurred further delay and cost as well. We have to work up those changes. So some were discounted, and the ones that have been brought forward and proposed are the ones that were consulted or engaged with through planning and building standards and have all been fully vetted.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Councillor McTaggart to move the paper.
Thanks, Convener. As explained in the paper, Council is being asked to approve the use of HRA homeless reserves to fill the financial shortfall relating to the Westhaw site contract. The use of these reserves will free up 12 properties, bringing them back into circulation, thus allowing them to be used to accommodate 12 families from our growing list of homeless applicants. Council has been previously made aware of various issues that have plagued this project, almost from the outset, not least that the originally appointed Tier 1 contractor went into administration, resulting in a long delay while a replacement contractor could be identified and appointed. This delay has resulted in an increase in the price of materials, and the new contractor has made it clear that they can't bring the project in at the original price, hence the need for this recommendation coming to Council for approval today. Hubco has managed this project on our behalf, and you'll see in the letter attached to the paper that our Chief Executive, Nicky Bridle, has voiced concerns over the handling of this. A full review has been requested, which was agreed by Hubco at a meeting earlier this week. I very much look forward to scrutinising that review, and I'm sure you all feel the same way. Nicky's letter also highlights the difficulties faced by the Westhaw residents, who were decanted from the site at the start of the project and were given an expected timeline to return to their community. That timeline has extended way beyond what could be described as reasonable. I'll draw your attention to the human element attached to the extended delays. As a reminder that this is not just bricks and mortar, it's people's lives. People who have been displaced for an unreasonable length of time while we work towards getting this project back on track. Regular meetings have taken place between the housing team and the displaced residents, and I've been at every one of them. The conversations have been challenging, with delay upon delay adding to the difficulties faced by the Westhaw residents. But I must add that the Westhaw community have been more than patient, and they've accepted these delays graciously, while at the same time making it clear to us how hard this has been on them and their families. We must bring this to an end. This project must be completed without further delay to allow these families to return to their community as soon as possible. The paper also outlines the various risks attached to this project should Council reject the recommendations. But as I've said, this is not just about buildings and contracts, it's about people and families. For that reason, I'd urge Council to agree the recommendations in this paper. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison to second.
Thanks, Convener. This project has unfortunately been going on for way too long now, and we do now need to move it on for the sake of the families who, through no fault of their own, have been moved out of their homes. There have been many issues around the project, not least of which was the major contractor going into administration. But we do now need to move on. As local members, we are also well aware that every time this topic comes up, and it has come up many times in Council, the traveller community of Westhaw are subject to some negative, in fact not some, a lot of negative comments that are uncalled for. The residents of Westhaw are also council residents. They do pay rent, they do pay council tax as well. And actually, I'd like to thank them for their patience and understanding throughout this lengthy process. As has been mentioned by Councillor McTaggart, we do need to have some form of investigation or review into this, into what has gone wrong, so that this project, we take the learnings from it and we don't get ourselves into this situation again. So yeah, as I say, I think we do need to agree this paper, and we do need to get this project moving for the sake of the families that have been moved out of their homes. So happy to second.
Thank you. The paper is now open to debate. Any wish to debate? Councillor Rennie.
Echo what other members have said about, needing an investigation into this matter, but obviously I fully echo what other councillors have said here, that we really need to get people back to their homes. So alongside the investigation, that's one thing, but I think the most important thing is to get people back to where they need to be. So fully in support of this paper.
Thank you. Councillor Forson.
Just really echoing the comments here. In 2021, the council committed to delivering a new site for the traveller community at West Hall, and a lot of expectations were set at that time, not least the timescales that would be stuck to, and unfortunately, for whatever reasons, a lot of out with the council's control, that's not been delivered. I do think that we have to push forward with the project and make sure it's delivered as soon as possible, and I think we need to keep an eye on anything else that could come up to potentially delay this. I think that the impact on the community can't be kind of misunderstood or kind of not understood properly here, because whenever a paper has had to come back to this council, it's covered in the local press and it does attract significant negative attention from certain members of our community, and that's just not acceptable, and no community should have to put up with that. So I do think that's regrettable. Moving forward, there has to be a proper review and investigation into this. It's a significant project with an organisation that we do a lot of business from, and we have to be sure as a council that everything has been handled appropriately. If it's not been handled appropriately, what went wrong and what lessons can we learn from it for future developments moving forward? Thanks.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Rennie.
Thanks, Convener. As has been said, the users of that site, their lives have been totally turned upside down through no fault of their own. And I think it's, as has been said already, I think it's only right and proper that we get the users of that site back into the community that they know, that they've grown up in, as travellers that they're used to having a base in that to return to. What hasn't been said much, of course, is that the travellers, the people who have been lifted out of that site are now occupying local authority homes as well. These are homes that can be released for use for the people sitting on the waiting lists that have been doing so for some time. Not only that, we also have people, I believe, that have been accommodated in bed and breakfast accommodation. And we all know the high cost that can be for the council in paying that. So hopefully all that can be brought back in. As been mentioned there, this process for some unknown reason has went wrong. We're not here to apportion blame. We're just here to recognise the fact that yes, mistakes have been made. And as the council leader has said, lessons have got to be learned from this. But let's not use that well-hackneyed phrase, we'll learn lessons and move on. Let's actually make sure that we are learning the lessons from this and make sure it doesn't happen again. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Councillor McTaggart, do you want an opportunity to sum up at all?
No, it's fine, thanks.
Okay. Given the almost consensus view, I think, in terms of that debate itself, I won't read each one of those individually in terms of recommendations, but we are recommended to note the points from 2.2 to 2.6 alongside 2.8 and 2.10. The two bits we've been asked to approve is the revision by the contractor relating to excess soil. It's detailed at 4.4 in this report on the site to reduce spend by 107,000, bringing the revised total project budget to 5,864. Further asked to approve the use of 200,000 of council earmarked homeless prevention activity reserves, which is detailed at 7.4 in the report, to fund the project beyond current financial governance. This recommendation is subject to approval of recommendation 2.7. Otherwise, the amount from that earmarked reserve would increase in equivalent value to 307,000. I'd be happy to approve the report as presented.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, item 5 on the agenda is Be the Future Clackmannanshire Transformation Space Report, and Lorraine's going to take us through that. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you, convener. I'm pleased to introduce this paper, which recommends that the council approves a new way of working with our communities and the steps that are involved to progress this development. I am joined this morning by Norman Gill, who's here, who has been working alongside me for the last year or so, funded by the Hunter Foundation, and Norman may be asked to assist me with some of the technical aspects of the proposal. So as previously set out as part of the Council's Be the Future transformation plans, we have a strong ambition in Clackmannanshire to bring our communities closer to how we prioritise and deliver services. And the core intention is inclusivity, as illustrated in the EQIA, which we prepared as we were developing the paper. Over the course of the past 2 years, we've been working in partnership with Scottish Government and the Hunter Foundation, but also with other partners, to envision how in practice you can transform services, focus on prevention and collaboration, and get better outcomes for people in our communities. This paper now sets the detail of how that can be done, taking a year zero approach, which allows the model to be tested and refined during that year. It should be acknowledged that given that this is a brand new initiative, and we believe will be the first in the UK, not just in Scotland, that year zero will allow us to trial aspects of the model. It may feel uncomfortable for some, however, because it is new. For that reason, we've taken careful advice from a number of experts over the course of the year, and we've designed the space to mitigate any risks, perceived or otherwise, as much as possible. The model is being described as a transformation space, which should be seen as a collection of parties and activities where new ways of working can happen. The council will remain the overall owner of the space, setting the priorities and the leadership. Elected members will still have a key role in decision making. And trade unions and others interested parties will continue to be included as year zero progresses and as some of the aspects may be refined. We have existing channels through the Be the Future board and through other channels to make sure that all those people continue to be involved. We have identified the need for an experienced fund manager in year zero, and it is proposed in the paper that this should be Foundation Scotland, given their extensive expertise in managing large funds. They have quite a significant amount of knowledge working in this area and manage funds in this area too. They know the locality very well, and they've got over 30 years experience in managing funds. They also work with other local authorities in Scotland. They also have experience in building capacity within citizens' panels and other models to ensure that people who are already quite disengaged can come to the fore and have their voice heard. Foundation Scotland would be responsible for grant making, tracking outcomes against funds, etc. One of the key benefits is that they will bring charitable status and they'll bring independence from the council in order to manage funds from other investors, which is a key part of the model. By setting up a community interest company, we can start to build a wider fund to support communities. From the council, we already have a number of funding streams where grants are awarded directly to organisations. That's normal practice at the moment. This model allows for those funds to be used collectively in a whole system, person-centred way, reducing silo working, and it will build on the work so far in relation to community wealth building, a wellbeing economy, participatory budgeting, and the single reporting framework that we've developed through the Family Wellbeing Partnership. It also offers a more defined approach for alliance partners to pool funding and to have a greater impact on outcomes for people, with a strong focus on prevention rather than crisis and statutory services only. There's strong evidence that there can be significant savings to the public purse by taking a prevention approach. As set out in the paper, this represents a significant change. If we do look at aspects of current practice, some of the aspects within the transformation space already exist within the council. However, we have tried to put the safeguards in place to mitigate any of the concerns that may already have arisen. But we do believe that this actually provides a more secure and effective framework with clearly defined outcomes that council will get reports on. However, given that it is the new and that we should be expected to keep council informed during year zero, and certainly an update on progress at the end of that year. The Hunter Foundation have agreed to continue to fund the startup during year zero and its development. As they have done so far, this is leveraging capacity and resource that we just do not have otherwise within the council, and this would not happen without that support. In addition, Scottish Government have been evolving their own policy making as a result of what's happening in Clackmannanshire, as we've heard previously, and they are also looking at ways that they can support this approach in terms of reducing ring-fenced funding and single reporting. And that is very close to being offered to a number of other authorities in Scotland as a result of the work in Clackmannanshire. They will also continue to be part of the investment fund for year zero. And we also have a grant, a request for other funding within Scottish Government that we haven't heard an answer for yet, but we do expect to hear in the near future. They too, Scottish Government, recognise the need for change if we are to sustain public services and to address some of the real challenges facing our communities. And as highlighted in our recent Best Value report, the Council does need to change the way it operates to ensure it is financially viable into the future. This model would contribute to that strategy. So whilst any questions raised are important, we will provide further detail on how they will be addressed during year zero. So the Council is asked to approve the recommendations in the report. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. The people's open to questions. Councillor Forson.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. It has been mentioned that whilst there's not, this particular approach, there are examples of similar, approaches being taken across Scotland, the UK, and elsewhere. Can you maybe just give some details of what these are?
I'm going to ask Norman to come forward because he's actually involved in some of those other examples, which is why his expertise has been invaluable. Norman, are you happy to talk about at least two of those that I know that you're involved in?
Okay, this one. Yeah, so as I said the other day, that there's nowhere that's doing absolutely everything in here, but every element of it, there's some stuff going on. Somewhere what makes us unique is it's all brought together into this ecosystem to make it work. At the moment in Edinburgh, there is work, in fact, Foundation Scotland are at the forefront of that, to do some work to bring together public money along with funded money from National Lottery and various other funds, and they've managed to gather £6 million into that fund as well. Not quite the same approach to community voice as we are proposing here. There are a number of things which kind of come around the edges of this, particularly in terms of money that comes from wind farms and from energy companies into local communities. So where community voice is put forward, some of those will have local authority money added to them as well. And there's various examples in Ayrshire, and I'm sure there's examples in this locality as well. Okay.
I've got another few questions, if that's all right. Now, the Council sets outcomes that we expect to achieve for our communities along with the Alliance and the Local Outcome Improvement Plan. Can we be given assurances that the outcomes that are set and the priorities that are set will still remain within this kind of proposal?
Absolutely. The outcomes that have been defined in the recent LOIP are exactly the same as the ones that we have applied to the space.
And I suppose there's allusions to it within the paper, but can you maybe just outline what you feel are going to be the main benefits to our communities from taking this approach?
Number of benefits, but the main one is that they will have a voice, a much stronger voice and what we have found through the work that we've done with Family Wellbeing Partnership over the last few years is when you ask communities what they need, what they want, they actually come up with solutions that actually are fairly simple and much less costly than some of the services that we provide within the council. And we saw that through the lens work. We can see it through some of the cash first approaches that we've used, the child wellbeing partnership in terms of the types of childcare that people need. So it's responding to that and using the money in a different way. So I think the community voice is absolutely front and centre. The second one I think that is really crucial is the ability to leverage additional funding. And I think we don't have that capacity. Independent funders will not lend money to and not invest in the council. That's just clear. We do not have that ability we get resource and capacity through things like the Hunter Foundation and the Family Wellbeing Partnership, but that's slightly different. This is about actually gathering a fund which potentially would give us, up to 3 times the amount of money that we do have available to provide those services. So I think those are the two in particular, Councillor Forson, that I would highlight.
Last question, really. Obviously, this work's been supported by the Hunter Foundation over a number of years, and we've got to the position that we're in. If we didn't proceed with this approach, what would the implications be?
It's quite clear that the Hunter Foundation board have invested in Clackmannanshire because they saw some innovation potential and real leadership within the authority, and have continued with that investment in a number of ways. However, we'll get to the end of the road with that interest. I think if they think that we're not prepared to take this step, we're not prepared to go that one step further, and they have actually said that, to be honest, that they will pull out. They have pulled out of other authorities where they haven't seen that leadership and potential, but they won't continue to invest in Clackmannanshire if we don't go forward.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Thanks very much, Convener. Obviously, I'm really pleased to see this, as you can imagine. But just a few questions, Lorraine, and they're probably things that you'll sort of iron out as you go on. So one of the first things that came to my mind was, obviously, being in the third sector for so long, the minute there's any sniff at all that the money comes anywhere near the local authority, other funders will not fund continuation funding. So, and as you know, kind of short-term funding for the third sector is really not useful because, you're sort of losing staff by the last 2 months usually, and you've got to then end with anyone that's benefiting from the service. So just in the risk that there wasn't kind of long-term funding and that other funders won't fund anything, how is it going to be made clear that it's not local authority?
So in terms of making that clear to the third sector organisations or to the funders? Sorry, Councillor Green.
No, I used to find it time and again when I put in a funding application, a tender, anything, if there was anything that made it look like the initial funding came from the local authority, they would say, we're not going to fund it, it's local authority responsibility, not ours. So, just to make that clear.
Yeah, I understand your question now. I think absolutely they will not fund into what is described as statutory services. Whereas what we're talking about here is not those statutory services. The council will still have a responsibility to provide those statutory services, and we will still have to try and, but there is as you will well know, there is a reduction on the need for statutory services if you get the prevention right. So if we can get to people earlier and to make sure that they get the support that they need, we're not getting them into the crisis stage. So there is that nuance. However, it will be very clear to funders that this is not replacing the services that the council already must provide.
Just a couple of other questions. So I was fortunate enough to achieve funding from a similar situation in Glasgow, but it was overseen by the third sector interface in Glasgow. They were the sort of lead body that oversaw it. And I'm wondering if there were any thoughts in this area, obviously with the experience of the third sector interface, to be involved in this.
We want them to be involved over the course of year zero to make sure that is part. I mean, they have a key role to play, not just as part of the alliance, but as somebody in the area, an organisation that knows communities well and knows the organisations. But I think the ambition goes beyond just the third sector. They do manage a number of funds already. So when I mentioned in the introduction to the paper, we use the third sector manage collections of funds already, so there is parts of this model already exist, but it's much more ambitious than that, I think, at this stage. So they would be a partner, they would be part of the process, but it wouldn't be solely just handing it over to the third sector. The other thing that I think the third sector interface we can improve on is getting the voice of communities right at the fore, as opposed to just the organisations that the third sector interface represent. I'm just thinking, Norman, if there was anything you would want to add to that in terms of, yeah.
Last question, just on a technical matter, obviously a KIC's an organisation that pays tax, so how would we avoid that?
Definitely bring in Norman on that.
So there's two parts to this answer. One is that apologies. The KIC itself, the funding won't come through the KIC. So the funding will go direct from investors, including the local authority, into the fund manager, Foundation Scotland in this case. What the KIC generates or is funded by and spends shouldn't attract tax. If it does, it's going to be.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. My question is, you spoke out there about also community voices being one of the most powerful tools in this. How do we ensure, because it's always something the council has struggled with, ensure that we're capturing all the voices? Because some of the communities in our county are much better at banding together, at voicing their concerns, at getting things done. Other communities struggle, and I'm a bit concerned. You mentioned about wind farm money, etc. Again, some of our communities benefit from that, some don't. I'm just worried that we're in position potentially creating a tiered system where some communities are forgotten about and the traditional ones rise to the fore each time, which could create a bit of a problem. Do we have any ingenuitive ways of dealing with that?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think the most important thing is that we're aware of that, and we actually absolutely keep that at the forefront of our minds, because that's one of the main, aims of the space, is to make sure that we widen that voice and we do reach. Foundation Scotland do have quite a lot of, and it doesn't need to be Foundation Scotland. There are other fund managers out there who, it may be that after year zero, Cora, for example, or another fund manager. And I think there are various different ways that people can be reached. The thing that interests me in Clackmannanshire, we just had, for those of you who managed to get to the gathering last week, in terms of at the town hall, that we worked in partnership with What Matters to You. Those people are the voices that we need to hear and bring into the room, and we've got better at that. And I think we just need to continue to strive to make sure that that remains front and centre, and that would be part of the board's role, as well as, in terms of the KIC as well, as to make sure that that is visible. And I have found that when you do make the attempt to go out to communities, they're certainly not backwards and coming forwards and telling us what they need, and we just need to be able to support that. So I think we just need to keep at it, to be honest, Councillor Lee. It is something that I'm very mindful of. And I think we are good at it in some areas, but we can be better.
So, ask a follow-up question. Thank you. So if it becomes apparent that this is happening and there is a split, would we direct some resources to try and build that representation up?
Potentially, yes. And I think also the whole point of year zero is to try and work through some of these issues. And it may be that we have a very specific area of interest. Say, for example, I'll use, no matter what I pick will be controversial, but anyway, just in terms of, just say, mental health supports, right? We know that there is a gap in mental health supports in Clackmannanshire. We hear that from our communities all the time. We have various pockets of money that goes towards providing support for mental health, whether it comes from the education people budget, from children's services, from adult services, from employability. We pull that money together to make sure that what we then provide in that area, what you go out specifically to try and get the voice of people. So there's ways of targeting the voice to bring it back to the purpose that we can do.
That's good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McTaggart, to be followed by Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, convener. Lorraine, how will this improve people who are furthest to the job market? How will this improve their employability prospects and their growth towards becoming more economically independent? I'm thinking around using it as a conduit, let's say, to fill the gaps that we know we have in service delivery with people who want to work in that type of service delivery. And if we can match these kind of things up, how would it improve our service delivery through the use of this vehicle to introduce skills pathways for people?
Thanks, Councillor McTaggart. So if we go back to what the overall outcomes defined by the LOIP, what we are trying to do is improve outcomes which will in part help people into employment. We have various strands of money at the moment that support people into employment, and we have a lot of key working, very careful key working with individuals, but sometimes we're just not able to reach with those programmes in the way that they are defined, people who are furthest away from the job market. This allows us to get to people earlier and almost not take the employability lens at front and centre, but actually just think about them as people and what actually might be better for them. So we've already done some of that, so we've listened to people really carefully. They tell us they can't get childcare, right? If we can address childcare, they tell us that they can't actually manage to hold down a job because they're finding it too difficult to cope with life. If we start to think about those and take a longer term view of some of those things, it's amazing what people can achieve if we just believe in them. But I think if we come at it from a lens of trying to get people into employment, and I'm not saying I'm not saying the employability team push people into employment. Please don't interpret what I'm saying as that. But I do think there's something about taking a real people-centred, holistic approach to what people need. And then the consequence of that is economic development and actually employability opportunities. But it may be that we need to stay with somebody for a much longer period of time than some of the existing programmes allow. But over a period of 5 years, they can then sustain employment and they can manage to improve things for their family and themselves. But sometimes the current funding arrangements don't allow us to do that. They're a bit short term, they're year on year, and it makes it really difficult for us to do this. This would allow us to take that multi-year funding type approach as well to make sure that it's not, everything doesn't end or we don't have to find solutions to the funding ending. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn.
Thanks, convener. Just a quick question on page 56 about the board membership. So kind of follow along with the theme like Councillor Lee was talking about. How do we ensure then, how do we come up with this board makeup, and how are we ensuring this is representative? And do you think anyone will be upset then that they wouldn't be included in this? Thanks.
This is very much about year zero, to be perfectly frank, in terms of so it's not set in stone, that board membership, absolutely not. So if it does emerge that we've missed people out or people don't feel as if it's appropriate for them, that's what we're suggesting would be the best makeup of the board membership at this stage, but we would be really interested before and while the board is running in year zero to adapt that and refine it should it be necessary.
So actually, this is basically a starting point, and then we'll see. No, that's perfectly fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Law, to be followed by Councillor Coyne.
Is this like taking Thrive to the next level? Because I remember going to down to Thrive to see the last cohort. It was so moving hearing the women's stories and just like going through that as to what's that's given them, like their mental health, their family, everything. It seemed to really kind of encompass that, and you could see the difference that it made in their lives. And I think one of the important things was obviously those friendships that they made. And that I take it that this is like taking that to the next level and kind of giving that kind of continued support and making it kind of wider to the wider community.
Thanks, Councillor Law. I think in part that answers Councillor Lee's point earlier about how do we make sure that we get the voice of people who wouldn't traditionally be coming forward with a voice. So the Thrive group is a really good example of where we wanted to do something more with that group of women. For those of you who were there, they'd already come through a pathway which we'd identified, and again, another part of funding that sits in a silo, but there wasn't an automatic pathway for those women. But if we'd had the transformation vehicle at that point, there is an opportunity for them to say, right, this is what we would like as our next step. Is there funding available? You're using their voice in a different sort of way. So I think we need to think about that voice as not just a panel, not just an engagement that is done through a website or whatever. It's about tapping into people when they are ready to speak to us and are ready to move on. So I think that there is huge potential for the group like Thrive to move on as a group, because that's what we heard them say that day. They wanted to stay as a group and move on to improve themselves and to move on to the different stage. So it's exactly that type of example.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne.
Thanks, Convener. A question on cost, but not financial. It's human energy cost. In any transformation process, any major change results in usually an uptick in the amount of human energy consumed. That I would see as, if we were doing a SWOT analysis on this, that would be in the threat box saying, how threatened is the scheme by human energy considerations? I mean, have we got the resource capacity within our workforce to deal with all the demands that are going to come through in year zero?
I can't see that there will be an increase in demand on council services officers by very, very little, if at all, to be honest, in comparison to what we're doing at the moment. If anything, it should be a reduction so that we can concentrate on other things that we don't have capacity for, and particularly the statutory stuff and the things that we have to, by law, return to Scottish Government and all the rest of it. So I think that will be actually a reduction. We might not see that in the first year, or it might not be as evident in the first year, because you're still trying to work through, do we need to adjust the board? Do we need to do this? What's the report writing? So there's still, and that's why the investment at the Hunter Foundation will be important, because they will continue to provide that. But I'm looking to the Chief Exec just to see that I'm not seeing anything that she would disagree with, but I can't see that.
Not at all. And I think we've talked a lot about innovation when we've been talking about our transformation approach more generally. Remember the conversation we just had a few weeks ago around the budget and how important it is to be able to have the capacity to invest in that. So I think by using the year zero approach, there will be some things that are unknown at this point. We're going to be working through that during the year. We do have some backup in terms of additional capacity to invest, should that be required, if this is really, really getting us into the place that we want to. So I think that we're covered on many fronts from my point of view, but I do entirely agree with what Lorraine's just said.
What do you think is a significant threat to the success of this? What should we be looking out for?
I think the biggest threat is that we're not brave enough. We don't have the courage to take the step into the unknown, to be perfectly honest. I think that's the biggest threat, and it is to transformation and innovation all the time. If we're not prepared to take that step into the unknown, it will fall away. And so I think it is managing the risk in a very sensible sort of way, but also recognising that there will be some unknowns and we will have to manage that. I hope that what we have done, and with the expertise of people like Norman and others round about us, that we have put as many safeguards in there as possible. That's what we've absolutely, and we, the people who work for the Hunter Foundation are people who have managed, big banks, and they're not people who are, small charity, and not that I'm disregarding that either. But I think there's a huge amount of expertise has gone around this to try and provide us with the safeguards. But that's what I think is the biggest risk.
Thanks. Staying again with cost, but this time it's financial. What comfort can you give councillors that the consumption of financial resource will be something that they will be able to have and involvement in the release of and some control over that?
So the plans as they stand are using funds that officers already have delegated authority over. I should say, because we already have grants that come into to the council, and council is not asked individually how to spend those grants. That's not what we do. You would be here every day being asked about how do we spend our money. So there is something about not worrying too much that we're suddenly being given a free-for-all to do more with the existing funds that we have. We have various mechanisms that allow us to report back to you on that, whether it's outturns or whether it's reports. The reporting on the fund will come back, and particularly given that it's new, I think one of the things we will have to sort out in the longer term is what type of reporting is sensible, because it should actually change if we're getting this right. But certainly within year zero, we would be expecting to come back to you regularly to say, so at the moment we have a list of funds that we are considering, largely those that are within the Gift of People Directorate, which would go into the fund. But we're not going to put all of those funds in straight away. We need to try and get to the point where we know, what should be released, and that we will keep you updated on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Lorraine. Can I ask Councillor Forson to move the paper?
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Lorraine, for answering all those questions. I'm pleased to propose the approval of the Be the Future Clackmannanshire Transformation Space Report, which is building a lot on our ongoing Be the Future Transformation Programme. The initiative represents a significant step forward in reshaping how we design, develop and deliver services, with a clear focus on placing community voice and collaboration at the centre of our decision making. This approach is innovative, and while it does carry some risks, we believe that given our current context, it is necessary to be bold. By introducing this model, we can open up new opportunities to leverage significant additional funding and resources for Clackmannanshire, and that's resources that wouldn't otherwise be available to us. I want to also just mention that there's a lot of talk just now about public service reform and how we deliver services. This is at the forefront of that. Governments, both Scottish and UK, are looking for ways that services can be delivered better to get better outcomes for people. And there's a lot of interest in what it is that we're doing here in Clackmannanshire. So the transformation space will foster a stronger, more equitable partnership between communities, public services and key stakeholders. It will empower residents to identify both the challenges they face and the solutions that work best for them, ensuring that the resources we have are directed where they'll have the most meaningful impact. By strengthening community wealth and fostering a wellbeing economy, we aim to shift from reactive service delivery to creating long-term sustainable improvements. Our approach draws from successful models across the UK and internationally, and over time we envision it evolving into a new way of managing public sector funding, strategically planned, disciplined and focused on delivering better outcomes for individuals, families and communities. We firmly believe that those with lived experience of social challenges are in the best position to help shape solutions, and this proposal will create a collaborative framework bringing together the community, public, private and third sectors to ensure that a wider range of voices directly influence decisions, including how funding is allocated. This initiative will drive change through 5 key objectives: by breaking down the silos to provide whole person integrated support, enabling community-led transformation, ensuring agile and impactful financial investment, by building community wealth and delivering a wellbeing economy, and establishing a single reporting framework that is meaningful to the community. Clackmannanshire Council will continue to set strategy and priorities for the transformation space, ensuring alignment with our local outcome improvement plan and providing the leadership and resources necessary for success. Community voice will guide prioritisation, decision-making and impact assessment. Independent funders and investors will be attracted to this innovative and community voice-led approach, bringing not only financial support, but also valuable expertise, research and strategic influence. A community interest company will be established to ensure robust governance and accountability, including oversight from elected members. And a charity status fund manager such as Foundation Scotland will oversee the fund from grant applications to contract monitoring and evaluation. The transformation space will also undergo scrutiny from Audit Scotland and Oscar, ensuring transparency and accountability. And a learning partner will assess the impact of the initiative, allowing for real-time adjustments and informing broader system transformation. We're already in discussions with potential funders, including the Scottish Government, to ensure investment for the upcoming financial year. And initially, the fund will be supported by existing council-managed resources, including some ring-fenced funds, aligning with ongoing discussions about greater financial flexibility. To ensure a smooth and measured approach, we are proposing a phased rollout. Year zero is the initial phase, and it's really a testing period to refine our approach, allowing us to build a responsive and effective system. And in subsequent years, we will use this learning to scale successful initiatives based on the insights gathered, continually adapting to meet the evolving needs of our communities. So just to conclude, the Be the Future Clackmannanshire Transformation Space is a bold, innovative initiative that will redefine how we engage with and deliver services to our communities. It does carry a degree of risk, but we are confident that by being brave and forward-thinking, we can unlock new opportunities for funding, but also create a more sustainable, community-driven future. And by approving this report, we are committing to a transformative, inclusive and sustainable approach to service delivery, one that places people at the heart of everything we do, and I hope that everyone will support the paper. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Forson. Councillor Lindsay to second.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, we absolutely regularly talk about the fact that we can't continue to deliver and operate as a council the way we currently do. And this project, this transformation space, provides an exact example of how we need to deliver services differently. Now, Clackmannanshire Council has a successful track record in partnership working, collaboration with local, regional and national partners, and of course funders across many projects, and not least the Family Wellbeing Partnership, Strive, Thrive and others that have been referenced even here today. We've always recognised the need to work with others to enable us to become innovative, to deliver outcomes that meet the needs of our communities, as we've discussed already through questioning. Clackmannanshire Council cannot achieve these objectives on our own, and we recognise that, and I think that's an important step. The transformation space does create a framework to enable community voice-led service prioritisation and transformation, and it is a structure that sets out to eliminate siloed funding and maximise community assets to deliver improved outcomes. It will also attract funds from other sources, as the council leaders outlined, leveraging public sector funds and strategically aligning existing local funding towards a set of locally agreed transformation goals, including our LOI. It has long been recognised that status quo is unsustainable, and the lack of focus on preventative solutions has resulted in unprecedented levels of failure demand in the system. The Council's ambition, aided by the transformation space, is to place emphasis on prevention and do more with a reducing resource and build on assets which exist in our communities already. The transformation space is a deliberate response to the challenges and requirements that were set out in the Christie Commission report many years ago, which described empowering individuals and communities receiving public services by involving them in the design and delivery of the services they use. Public service providers being required to work much more closely in partnership to integrate service provision and improve outcomes achieved. Prioritising spend on public services with a focus on early intervention, and reducing duplication and sharing services where possible across the public, third and private sectors. Now, this transformation space gives us the opportunity to put in place the conditions where these changes are possible and over time meet our strategic objectives. So happy to second the paper on that basis. Thanks.
Thank you. The paper's now open for debate. Councillor Reddy.
You can see me jumping in here, thanks, Convener. Yeah, obviously I'm delighted to see this. It's something, as you all know, I've been talking about for some time in terms of saying that we can't just keep going on the way that we have been, and that we need to be innovative, we need to be forward thinking, we need to involve the third sector, all of those things. So I was really pleased to see this paper, as you can imagine. I think it's an excellent way forward. Obviously, in the questioning, you've realised it will take time to see how it beds in and how it works. One of the things being having the sustainable funding, because for the third sector, it's never useful to have a year or even 2 years. You need to have long-term into the future funding, because you can't make promises that you then can't keep. So it'll be important to have that sustainability. And just on looking at that, I mentioned the kick, and basically I understand from what Councillor Coyne said about the oversight and board membership involving councillors. My only worry about that is that funders will then perceive that as being a council-led service. And I think we might need to see how that works, because even for funding into the organisation itself from external funders, they might not fund it if they see it as council. So that's just one small thing. But other than that, I think, and the ownership by people with lived experience, I think we've found is absolutely essential to ensure that we have success. We need buy-in, but I also take the point raised by others in terms of making sure it's not just the same people that are involved all the time. I think it was you, Councillor Lee, said that. So I think it's really important to make sure it's people that we don't reach normally who engage. And I'm specifically thinking of people with long and enduring mental health issues who may find it difficult to engage in processes, but they're the very ones who we need to engage. So I think I'm not being critical, because I think this is the way forward. And I think the more that the public sector, as you said, Councillor Forson, are involved with these type of initiatives, the more that we will stop having reliance on continuous public funds, and will strengthen and develop the third sector and others in community to be able to find their own solutions. And I think it's like we're not the paternalistic local authority doing to people, that we're getting people to be empowered and engaged in developing their own solutions to issues, I think is the way forward. But giving them that start through this process, I think will be really helpful. So very happy to support this initiative and the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reno.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm not going to go on a lot, because I think a lot of what I was going to say has just been covered. I think one of the things that's extremely important here, and has been mentioned repeatedly, is the word community. In the matrix on page 49 and Appendix 1, it shows that the community will be at the centre of this. Has it been touched on before? It's about getting out to all communities, and especially the communities who are less vocal than other communities. I remember the days back from urban aid funding, where, as has been touched on there, you're getting funding for a very short period, and at the end of that funding, the communities were left high and dry. I see this as being a move on from that, and I look forward to seeing this one working. It will take time to bed in. That was the problems in the past, that there wasn't time for projects to bed in. This one has to be there. If we listen to what the communities are saying, and as has been touched on earlier, the communities have been considered here, and we have reached out to the communities to find out what the communities are asking for. Let's be bold enough to give it to the communities, as long as it's within our capabilities and resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Forson, you want an opportunity to sum up?
Just briefly sum up. I think for me this has been a journey. 5 years ago, I don't think we could have been approving this proposal that's before us today. But through the investment through the Hunter Foundation and Columba 1400, I think our organisation has changed a lot, and we've really worked to, I suppose, widen that change with our partners, but also with our communities. There's been significant capacity building taking place within our communities through the Columba 1400. And that has been working with some of our most marginalised and furthest away communities to ensure that they do have a voice. And I think that's particularly started to bear fruit. When we've seen the work that's come forward through projects like the Lens and What Matters to You, we can see that communities are coming forward who probably wouldn't have normally come forward they've been able to put forward proposals about what will make the biggest difference in their lives, and small investments has made significant changes. I think that's just the start of things. So we've been putting the building blocks in place to allow some of this work to happen over the years. So I welcome the support, you know, in the comments across the chamber for this one. It doesn't come risk-free, but I think that, you know, we're in a position now where we've got to start taking some of those risks to try and get the better outcomes that we're all striving for our communities. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are we happy to approve the paper as presented? Thank you very much. Item 6 is the annual Treasury Management Report for 2023-24. Lindsay will take us through that.
Thank you and good morning, Council. So this report gives an overview of the Treasury management activities for the Council during the 23-24 financial year, and it outlines the Council's borrowing and investment positions as at 31st of March 2024. At that date, cash balances remained at a sufficient level of 12.5 million, with 8.2 of this invested in short-term investments. During the year, interest rates steadily increased and short-term investments of cash balances earned a higher than budgeted return, amounted to 1.7 million. Whilst this rate increase has been beneficial for investments, it also increases the cost of any future external borrowing to fund capital investment. The Council's external borrowing continues to reduce, and as at the 31st of March 24, external borrowing stood at 132 million, a reduction of 2 million from the previous year. This was due to repayments made and no additional external borrowing was taken to undertake capital expenditure financing. The Council continues to remain in an under-borrowed position, which means that it is not borrowing more than it is expending on capital resources. The report confirms the Council's compliance during the year with the Treasury and prudential limits as set out in the annual Treasury Management Strategy Statement, which was approved in March 2023. The report also provides some brief commentary on the economic background and comparison of the Council's capital expenditure and financing requirements compared to the approved prudential indicators. I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Do we have any questions for Lindsay? Councillor Quinn?
Thanks, Kevin. Lindsay, there is inevitably an awful similarity among these reports from time to time. It's just the nature of the beast, I guess. What are the things you think, the lessons we should really take from this particular report? What are the highlights and lowlights of it?
I think the highlights is that we've operated our Treasury activity in line with what we set out to do, which was our Treasury Management Strategy Statement. There is not any adverse or anything that goes against that in this report, so we've done the activities as we set out to do. We've made a beneficial amount of interest and income, so 1.7 million, which is due to the activity we've tried to take advantage of the increased interest rates. We've not been borrowing, so we've been using our cash balances to fund any expenditure that we needed to, so we've not increased borrowing. But that does mean we may need to increase borrowing later on. So I suppose that is a very positive report that I'm pleased to present, that doesn't highlight any adverse impacts during the year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Well, they may be in here, Lindsay, but I was just wondering what sort of work we do as a council to ensure that our investments are ethical and that we use sort of green investments as well.
Thank you. So we work with our Treasury advisors to make sure that we're operating in line with the Prudential Code in terms of how we do investments, and we make sure that investments on the basis of our return is not risk-based, so we look for that liquidity and risk before we look at return. So when we're considering investments, we make sure that that risk is protected first. So we look at our investments in terms of the portfolio,
So we do take account of any green investments or making that social responsibility, but it's not at the forefront of our decisions, I'd say. It's a subset of that. So, but we do make sure when we're investing that we're not investing in something that is posing a risk for is going to be sensitive to the councils, sensitive to reactions in the markets that would affect the council.
Sorry. Just on that, in terms of, I was just thinking about ethical investments, the kind of reputational damage that can come from that sometimes, which is something different, I guess. It's not the same as the kind of financial damage, but it's certainly something a lot of people are considering, and also with the rise really in environmental issues and green investments then coming up. I'm just thinking in the long-term future, is it worth, I mean, obviously the fund managers will have that in their sort of ideas, but just in terms of, are we considering that about sort of what will be coming in the longer term?
Yeah, so when I mentioned risk, that is reputational risk as well, about where we invest. So when we look at our investment options, you'll see that there's quite a small number of options that we use in terms of investments. We do consider how they use the money as well. So we're making sure that we're not putting the council at risk reputationally by into something that would be damaging. And we're looking at that going forward as well. That's, whilst it's not that first point, it is encompassed in that review piece.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Forson.
The report provides a comprehensive overview of the Council's treasury activities over the past year. It details how the Council's investments, borrowing and overall financial strategy have been managed. Throughout 2023-24, we navigated a challenging economic landscape marked by inflationary pressures and geopolitical uncertainties. And despite these challenges, our proactive approach has ensured the stability and resilience of our financial operations. As of the 31st of March, the Council held investments totalling £12.5 million, primarily in short-term cash and cash equivalents, and our adherence to the approved investment strategy ensured that all activities remained within the set limits, maintaining the security and liquidity of our assets. Borrowing requirements continue to be prudently managed, aligning strategies with the prevailing economic conditions and interest rate forecasts. This careful management has allowed us to meet our capital financing needs while minimising costs. Throughout the year, the Council complied with all regulatory requirements and internal policies related to treasury management. Regular reporting and oversight have been integral to our approach, ensuring transparency and accountability in all of our financial dealings. So I'm happy to propose the paper.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay to second.
Thanks, Convener. Happy to formally second on the basis of the proposal. Thanks.
Thank you. The paper's open to debate. Anybody wish to debate the paper any further? Happy to approve? Oh, sorry, note, just to note the paper. Happy to note. Thank you. Item 7 is the integrated joint board budget. I'm required to suspend or seek approval to suspend standing orders at 71 in this paper, given that it's been in front of us within the last 6 months, obviously. The grounds for that, I think, are really evident in the paper itself. There's a significant change to the circumstances that came before us the last time we made a decision in around this. So looking for approval to suspend standing orders to have this paper here today. Thank you. Nikki, can I ask you to take us through the paper?
Thanks very much. So this is a late and urgent paper which has been prepared following the receipt of 2 requests from the IJB Chief Officer for additional financial contributions from the Council to the integrated budget in respect of the 2024-25 forecast outturn and in support of the setting of the IJB's 2025-26 budget. To aid Council's decision-making, the paper sets out contextual information in respect of the operation of the integrated budget since its inception in 2016-17. Key points to note are that the Council has prioritised its investment in health and social care and has not imposed significant savings to be made as in other Council service areas. Since 2016-17, the Council's contribution to the integrated budget has grown by 98%. There has been considerable variation year on year in budget outturn at the level of individual constituent partners. And up until the start of 2023-24, Clackmannanshire was the only partner showing a cumulative net underspend on its outturn. 2023-24 itself marked a significant shift in the trend across all partners, with a considerable adverse movement in financial outturns, but especially within the two councils. Even then, this was experienced most acutely in Clackmannanshire, where a movement of £4.6 million was experienced, which is equivalent to 18% of that year's operating budget. A range of post-pandemic demographic pressures have been highlighted as having contributed to this situation. Additionally, in Clackmannanshire, this has been compounded by a lack of management capacity and oversight, for instance, as illustrated in the internal audit of purchase ordering in adult social care, which reported a no assurance outcome. The Chief Officer has submitted 2 requests for additional financial support in respect of the forecast overspend of just over £11 million in the 2024-25 financial year, and the residual £8 million gap in the IJB's proposed budget for 2025-26, after taking account of the almost £11 million worth of savings that will be proposed. The IJB Chief Finance Officer has also supported the Chief Officer by proposing 3 risk share options for each of these 2 requests. For Clackmannanshire, this results in a cumulative range of a minimum additional financial contribution of £2.3 million to a maximum of £9.6 million based on current assumptions. The paper sets out the current financial planning assumptions, potential options available to the Council, as well as highlighting the key risks associated with each of the potential options. The overall position across both requests received is summarised in Appendix A for ease. Paragraph 4.24 also sets out some additional information in respect of constituent partner assumptions and Scottish Government engagement at the time of preparing the paper. I'm happy to take any questions, and Joanna and Ewan are also here from the partnership should they be able to assist with the questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. People's open to questions. Councillor Moore.
Nikki, can you just confirm what the risks would be to the council if we kind of deviated from that position that we made the last budget?
So the paper almost summarises quite a lot of conversation that we had probably in the budget meeting. So the key areas would be around the risks to service and financial sustainability for the future. So as you know, we had quite a lot of discussion in that previous meeting about the need to be able to have some financial coverage to be able to invest in those activities that allow us to focus on delivering that sustainability position for the future. The only places that we can look to find this money includes those areas. The second area that we can look would be to our existing uncommitted reserves. So our uncommitted reserves, having set the budget a few weeks ago, are on the minimum level. So what we would need to do if council was minded to fund some of one of these options, some of them actually would take council reserves down below the minimum. The discussion that I've had with Joanna has been that any contributions the council made would need to be repaid. So it wouldn't be a permanent position on both of those things, but it would mean that in the intervening period, that risk profile is enhanced.
And I take it there is a risk that we wouldn't get, even if we're saying, you know, we would want that money back if we're loaning it, there's a huge risk that that might not happen given kind of last few years.
Yeah, so there's lots of things that, I mean, we're sitting here, especially if we look at the 2025-26 position, we're all doing our best to try and make sure that you do appropriate levels of due diligence to make sure that you can deliver the things you've set out, but things happen. So it could be that either the council or the partnership experiences additional pressures over and above those that are already known or projected. If that was the case, there would be a call, obviously, for funding to support those additional pressures, be it in a council scenario or for the partnership. I think one of the other things that I've been discussing with Joanna as well is I've seen a huge amount of work go into trying to develop the proposals for 2025-26, and it does give me a lot of reassurance. However, up until this point, the partnership hadn't developed that track record of delivering, again, savings and transformation. I know from the work that's been done, there's been a lot of thoroughness and due diligence around trying to identify which things will be secure, but at this point, obviously, it's untested. So, as for council savings, you may or may not be able to deliver them due to events that might happen between now and the point of trying to implement.
I was just wondering if I could ask Lorraine a question. Is that okay? Just introduce to me. Thanks. I was just wondering, are you able to kind of speak about, obviously, the budget restraints that you guys have faced in the People Directorate, especially, I'm thinking in particular, child services?
Yeah, so within the People Directorate, as you know, we have the budget for children's services, education and justice services. And the justice services budget is a ring-fenced budget, so it has to be spent on the purpose that it is allocated to Section 27 arrangements. It's probably worth saying that over a period of time, there are a number of things which have allowed us to keep the people budget on track, which have contributed to where we are. We have significant unexpected placement charges within children's services that come through at very short notice, where families arrangements break down and we suddenly have to find placements for children, and that's quite a regular occurrence within children's services. So, and those placements, if we can't find kinship placements or foster placements or anything locally, are often very expensive external placements. So we've been aware of that for some time and have been trying to manage down and build up the prevention services that stop us having to go for those high cost placements. So one of the things we've tried to do is reduce the dependency on high cost placements, but get the balance on prevention and early intervention much higher, which similar to what I was saying previously, if you invest in that, your crisis prevention reduces. So we've managed to change the balance of that. Over a period of time, it's not something that we've done immediately, but it has. We were sitting with a quite considerable overspend at one point on the number of external placements, and we brought them down considerably because that contributes hugely. The other 2 or 3 things that have helped us, we've redesigned the services. We've taken out some posts out of children's services as well as people as a result of the budget savings that we've contributed to across the council over the last few years. But we've tried to protect the front line. So the posts that we have removed have been backroom posts, if you allow me to use that term. That doesn't mean to say there's not a need for those posts, but we've taken the hit on those as opposed to the front line. But we've also worked in a more integrated way. So instead of single strand of work just being managed for children's services, we look at the child and the family as a whole, and we integrate all the budgets that we have to support that family. So it may be that actually just by going to sports activities, we can actually keep that child at home because it means that they've got something to do, which is much more active and allows the mum to cope at home. So it's been very creative, I think, Councillor Law, in terms of the budget, but we have had to contribute to the council savings as well as, so it's not just been a year-on-year same budget that we've had. We have reduced the budget, but we have at the same time allowed, through a number of initiatives, reduce the costs. We've got Strive, which contributes again to prevention. We've brought in a number of initiatives. The early help team, as part of the children's services redesign, has meant that we have less child protection registrations than we previously ever had. It's reduced considerably by getting to families earlier. So it's just shifting the balance is how that's allowed us to keep the budget on balance.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie.
I have a few questions. Obviously, it's regrettable that we had the paper only a couple of days ago when it's such a significant concern for this group. But I wanted to ask I know the IJB have a plan, a recovery plan over the next few years, and I just wondered what the likelihood is that any money that we contribute will be recouped by the council in future years, or whether that money is spent and then lost.
So I think you might get a double-handed answer here. I may ask Joanna to come up as well. So I can tell you from the council perspective. So as I mentioned before, the conversations I've had with Joanna have been that any contribution the council made would be on the basis it would be repaid. The delivery plan as it stands just now and as is summarised in the paper forecasts a surplus in the second year but a further deficit in the third year of the delivery plan. And that is assuming that you make the level of savings each year. As we know, savings can be different than you imagined, however much due diligence you do, you know. So there is an element of we can't do the crystal ball gazing, but you do good, thorough due diligence up front to make sure that those savings are as secure as possible. And then you make sure that you focus resources on delivery and implementation of those savings. All of my conversations with the team just now suggest that that is the absolute intention. But Joanna, would you like to come up and just say a little bit as well?
Thank you, colleagues. I should also say before I start that I'm sitting here as Chief Officer, but I'm also one of Nicky's directors in the Council, so and I take seriously my fiscal responsibilities to the Council as much as the HSAP. In relation to the £11 million savings, if we start off with that for 25-26, just really want to thank Nicky for allowing myself and the leadership team to take time out to really focus and take a really fresh and detailed look at all the areas that we felt that we could prioritise from and prevent frontline staff cutting. So we have done that. We have got a 3-year delivery plan. So I know it's an anxiety, it's a stress for us all around the position that we're at for 25-26 in relation to that £8 million gap. And that will be divided by the three partners, and that's obviously work in progress. But actually, if we look forward to 26-27, and if you recall, we took members through this last Monday, 26-27 sees us with a surplus, and that's based on the full year impact of savings this year. And I have confidence in the delivery plan. There's obviously some difficult decisions that we have been spending extensive time going through and working through. I don't know if it's helpful at all for members to see the difference in why the budget is more in terms of service delivery. I've got some detail and I'm really happy to have this as a briefing afterwards, written briefing to members if they would like it. Okay, thank you. I'll hold that thought.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful, particularly maybe to audit and scrutiny as well, to allow us to kind of really scrutinise what we're receiving. I think that would be excellent, very much appreciated. Just while you're here anyway, just like obviously a lot of the savings are dependent on decisions taken on some services that may impact on Clackmannanshire. It's not guaranteed that those savings would be approved. Is there a sort of contingency if they weren't?
So for all of the savings that have been identified, there's been extensive work undertaken. So we are going to the IGB next week with confidence and hopefully be able to give confidence around groundwork that has been taken in relation to savings. In relation to savings, we've looked across Clackmannanshire and Stirling, really looking forward. Christy was mentioned earlier on about really looking to the future in relation to the delivery of care that people receive and we want to receive when we're living here. And that will be articulated in the papers and at the IGB next week. And of course, depending on decisions, they'll be coming back to the council in May, depending on what decisions are made next week.
Moving on. Sorry, this is more a question for Lindsay, I think. I would just be interested in, obviously with the short-term nature of us receiving the paper, I just would like some sort of idea of what the recommendation of our Section 95 officer is and what option we should choose. I know you can't tell me, but just talk around it.
So, yeah. So the paper paper does capture all the options available to the council, and what we've done is we've tried to work within the means of what we've got available in terms of financial position, but it's really key that we set out to council what the risks of that are. So if you're using minimum reserves to be below the minimum 2%, that is a risk to the council that we will not have the funds to pay for any additional pressures that come up. It is a very difficult thing, but we, as I said, Chief Executive and I have tried to make that paper as complete as possible at setting out those risks, and it's up to then council to decide what the course of action is. So not for officers to recommend a position, just give you the facts.
Yeah, of course.
I was just going to make the point, this came up at the briefing the other day a wee bit as well when we talked about the paper. I think for me, as officers, we're in the position of needing to highlight those things that are technically possible, but whilst balancing that against the risks. And that's what we've tried to achieve, that balance with the paper. And I think it is such a difficult decision on this one. We've just tried to give you the full landscape and then summarise it for you, because I realised it was quite complex too. But I think on this occasion, it's not one where we would say one over another, because it depends on your lens on each of the individual risks and some of the cumulative impacts and the risks.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on the reason I asked the question, I guess, is there was some discussion in the paper about utilisation of general reserves. Now, my concern in that is we have some major disaster that hits Clackmannanshire and we don't have any reserves left. And I was just wondering, what the level of risk is. I mean, obviously looking at the financial thing in the whole rather than just individual, like looking at, what the kind of potential challenges of that would be.
Thank you. So, yeah, as was mentioned, the risk set out in the report, that is a high risk for the council, and that if we do not have the funds to fund any additional pressures that come in, when we discussed the budget, we talked about the unfunded national insurance and direct contribution. We also talked about if there's a pay increase above 3% that we budgeted, we do not have the funds to cover that. So that would mean that we would have to bring a revised budget back to council, and that could potentially mean that we're cutting services to individuals, but that could mean job losses as well, because we're then not delivering those services. So it would require us potentially to bring a revised budget back.
Does that lead to the risk of statutory services only then, if we were in that position potentially?
I think if you reflect back on the budget, we consider statutory services as well as non-statutory. So potentially there's the impact that it could impact on provision of statutory services, depending on the quantum of the amount.
Thank you, Councillor Forson, to be followed by Councillor Coyne.
Great, thanks. I've got a couple of questions. I think for me the frustration is that as a council we've got little control over the spending that's happening on our behalf. If it's one of the departments within the council, whether it's the police or the people directorate, information is brought back and council's asked to make a decision as to whether there will be restrictions on spending, whether there will be changes to service delivery. From my perspective, to get kind of landed almost retrospectively with an overspend of that size is quite difficult. So I'm really looking to find out what steps are being taken to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
So Joanna's already alluded to this actually in terms of the two hats she has to wear as Chief Officer to the IJB and as one of my directors in the senior team. So we have struggled, and I think we've reflected over the years on whether or not there's an issue about the design of our partnership with the two councils being in there, but it has been clear, certainly at the Clackmannanshire level, that we've not had the same degree of operational oversight, even at the senior level, and input. I've been discussing that with Joanna. I have absolutely no issue at all with how Joanna and I are working, and everything is an open dialogue included on overall of the operational activity. That is a relatively new state of affairs for us as a council. As you know, we've had vacancies we've struggled to fill, even at positions below as well. So I think from where we are now and going forward, I am reassured, but we do have some legacy issues that we were seeking to address. But Joanna and I have had very open conversations about that. I suppose, what happens with the
the reporting is it tends to come back quite retrospectively. So it will come either to council as an annual report or to audit and scrutiny as an annual report after it's happened. So is there something that we can put in place either as council or through audit and scrutiny to make sure that there's much more real-time information being provided?
So, as you know, I mean, the out-term monitoring comes through audit and scrutiny along with council out-term monitoring. I think the issues have been some of the swings that we've seen, particularly post-2023-24, that watershed year that we've highlighted in the paper. And I think it's given us a very acute position in terms of the out-turn for 24-5. The other thing that often comes up is the issue of the systems and the support for the systems, which, as you know, is being addressed just now. I think in the meantime, it's something that between Joanna, you and myself and Lindsay, we need to look at how, until we have the new system in place, how we get more closer to real time as we can through the out-term monitoring, because certainly the experience last financial year, the 23-24, was that it was probably, if you recall, around about the summer, we started to raise concerns, and then we were in constant dialogue with the partnership from that point on about the significant swing that there'd been in the Clackmannanshire forecast. So we need to probably have a think about how we can do that in a more time, I've lost the phrase I'm looking for, more real time. Than it being as retrospective as you highlight. I think there is something about the currency of the information. There's also there's something about the activity levels and the financial information being aligned at the right point from the earliest point that we need to make sure of in terms of the forecasting as well.
Then my next question would be, I suppose, around the recovery plan. I'm wondering if there's any more information, although I think you've said, Joanna, it maybe be helpful to have a briefing around about that. But I'm kind of wondering how we as a council can have input into the kind of recovery plan and how we've got the opportunity to scrutinise what's been delivered through that on a more real-time basis as well.
Thank you for that. Ewan obviously is here today and we want a transparency about not just the finance but the performance so that you're cited in that and you're cited in what's happening here in Clackmannanshire. We've got an offer. We would welcome having regular briefings both in written and in person with you. And as of 31st of March, a week on Monday, we're introducing weekly finance and performance monitoring. We've been building up to that actually and put an awful lot of work in. In relation to the annual reporting, there's a government cycle that we need to go through. That does mean there's a delay, and we've got Wendy here as well. And we have been discussing that quite a lot recently, how we bring you real-time performance and again, just for you to feel that although the services are delegated to the partnership, there's still responsibility here and you have still got influence here. So really wanting to see that and also really aware that over a number of years, and it's not unusual here, that the council has lost sight of what's happening within the partnership. And whilst we're here presenting our financial position, actually there is some really amazing, fantastic work going on across Clackmannanshire that I'm certainly really proud of to see.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne, to be followed by Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. Just to follow up on the point made, the portion, would it not work to have some kind of triggered deviation? If your information is current enough and and it's graphed somewhere, if there's a deviation of let's say 5%, that's reportable. Anything less is not reportable. It saves time reporting situation normal. You really want to get involved when things are starting to go too good or too bad. To find out what the reason for that is, because obviously the controls, you can take advantage of a too good situation, say we're learning something here, or you can start to remediate a bad situation. Would that work? Could that be built into it?
I think it could. I think though, to be honest, we've probably got a step before that, Councillor, which is actually having the earlier notification of the spot of the forecast out position, and that's been a combination of the not blending the activity and financial information as well as could have been done, and then also a function of the system that flows through the partnership, so from the council into the partnership officers to actually come up with the forecast outturn. So I think we need to do work in that space first, and that will make it more timely. It will bring some of those timelines forward a wee bit. But I think beyond that, then refining it with sorts of triggers and so on, we could certainly look at.
Okay, thanks. Second question. It relates to the tables 5 and 6 on pages 138 and 141. In the sort of right-hand column of each, there's the ambition of 11 million on one and 8 million on the other. And we're being asked to select the option that we prefer. Now, this only works if all three parties choose the same option. Now, have we the freedom to choose our own option single-handedly, or do we have to get agreement within the group that we will all choose the same option?
Can I be really cheeky and say ideally both? So, no. What happens is that the way it usually works is that you would, as an individual partner, work on your position. Up until now, actually, and you can see in the paper, we've set out where in previous years we've made additional contributions. That's largely been covered off at CFO Section 95 level and been endorsed by chief execs. And actually, it's been in a position, in a situation where all partners have been able to cover the same options. I think we're in a different place now, because you can see the way the activity level has really radically shifted within the partnership. We've also got the added complication that we are partway through the review of the integration scheme. So the integration scheme would make provision for what happens in a situation like this. So if there's an overspend or there are variances and so on. So that's covered in a section of the integration scheme. At the moment, 2 of the 3 partners, well, the 2 that aren't us basically, have agreed to a revised scheme. We have not agreed the revised scheme, and you'll recall we had the briefing at which you expressed concerns about provisions within that scheme. So we need to resolve that position, because the idea behind the review was, one of the questions anyway was, is there a single risk share option that partners could agree on? To simplify, up until now, what's happened each time Ewan has presented us with the options broadly in line with what's presented in these options. And we've as a precedent, have settled on the voting shares historically. As you can see, that is far more challenging for us now in the financial situation we're in and the level of reserves we've got and so on.
So if all 3 partners choose the option that suits them best, we haven't solved the problem. The problem doesn't go away, we'll be back again in a fortnight's time with another set of numbers, will we not?
That is exactly the situation. So, but what you would expect is, in partnership spirit, there would be a coming together and seeking to negotiate a position, maybe taking account of history and so on, and thinking about the individual ability and financial capacity of partners, and the fact that there is a potential for repayment of that investment. This is basically a cash issue, in terms of year to year on the budget. So I know we spoke the other day about this, and Lindsay was talking about viewing things as advance payment and so on.
Yeah, but I'm still not understanding what the benefit of going through this selection exercise is if it's not actually solving the problem.
Because it may. So you have options before you that if we take each year separately, because they are 2 separate asks and slightly separate issues pertain to each. So in terms of 2024-25, basically the paper gets you to the place that we could look at 2 of the 3 options from an affordability point of view. However, looking at what has historically been the precedent of voting shares comes with a number of risks to us. So the question to council is that it is technically possible to do it, but is it a level of risk that council feels able to tolerate from a financial point of view?
Councillor McTaggart.
Both my questions have been answered. Thanks. The other question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Rennie.
It's another question for Joanna and you, and it's just obviously we're considering from a council viewpoint what the risk is to council. Maybe could you explore with us what the risk to the IJB is of the different options?
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. At the current moment in time, without an agreement in 24-25 and a funding solution on the gap for 25 and 26, that is taking Councillor Coyne's point of view to all the partners. IGB would not be able to set a balanced budget. That means there would be a requirement for an immediate recovery plan. It means we could not take on any further expenditure commitments. That has implications for all the partners in terms of things like ability to recruit to posts, ability to agree to care packages for presenting need and such like. So the stakes are pretty high. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks all for your contributions there. Councillor Law to move the paper.
I'd like to thank the new Chief Officer, who's only been in post for the last 3 months or so, for open and honest engagement in the discussions we've had and that an action recovery plan is being made. We find ourselves presented with another paper that requires real focus on the context in which it is appearing in front of us. As we heard, up until 23-24, Clackmannanshire had an underspend within the Health and Social Care Partnership. There's been a prevailing view that Clackmannanshire has been a partner that's had to be continually bailed out. The information within this paper highlights this has not been the case. The change in 23-24, which has continued in 24-25, is a stark contrast compared to the preceding years. There are reasons for the significant change in movement detailed in 3.6 of the paper. I have requested further information on these details as the change is so dramatic that this does require more scrutiny, especially how a projected increase of those over age 75 in Clackmannanshire could account for such changes in these years. The overspend in the Health and Social Care Partnership is jaw-dropping, and the Council is being asked for further contribution, even though we have had no control over the spending. We've heard from Lorraine Sander speaking about, in particular, child services and the work that they've carried out to manage these essential services within the ever-restricting Council budget. And let's not forget, they've also had to deal with rising costs and staff and inflation as well. As I said earlier, I've spoken with the new Chief Officer, and I know that she has plans similar to those that have been undertaken in child services, and again, welcome this needed intervention. Clackmannanshire has been a good partner within the Health and Social Care Partnership, and we continue to be a good partner in every way possible. However, we cannot financially contribute what has been requested for us for the 24-25 overspend within the Health and Social Care Partnership. We sat in this chamber only 3 weeks ago and agreed a budget. This was an extremely difficult budget to set. It's where we took the decision to raise council tax by 13%. There was an amendment to lower council tax to 8%, but this was rejected due to the risk that this would place on both council finances and services. In the budget, we have set aside a general services pressures reserve, and this was partly based on a financial contribution of 1.327 million to the Health and Social Care Partnership. We are not in the financial position that we contribute any more than what was allocated in our budget. We aren't even 1 month in from the budget setting, and we have been hit with our first cost pressure. The council leader emphasised in our budget meeting Clackmannanshires brutally unique financial position, and here we are again having to explain this. While other partners are able to contribute an additional higher percentage, we cannot. Our council budget is around half of what Stirling Council is, and therefore setting aside 1.327 million has a greater impact on our budget, and we have all felt this. And this is why we are unable to provide an additional contribution for 25-26. All those risks that we spoke about in the budget setting is why we could not support the amendment could come into play if we agreed this additional contribution. Child services, along with other services that we have tried to protect in our budget, would be put at risk if our reserves are lowered to a limit beyond what we had agreed. And while I completely empathise with the position of the Health and Social Care Partnership and the work the new Chief Officer has undertaken in the last 3 months, and further on in this meeting I will be requesting to join the IGB as a member, I cannot recommend that we, Clackmannanshire Council, contribute more than the 1.327 million that was set out in our budget for 25-26.
Thank you. Councillor Forson to second.
Yeah, I'm happy, I suppose, to second the paper. Over the last 9 years of the Health and Social Care Partnership, investment has increased from 15.2 million to 30 million. I think that indicates our commitment to funding the partnership and delivering services for communities. But it's important to point out that no other service in the council has seen this level of increase. In fact, many services have actually seen a decrease in investment. I think my questions probably belied a bit of my frustration at the position that we've ended up in here. As a council, we retrospectively get the information and get told that there's been an overspend, and we have little input into how that overspend is then addressed, other than deciding whether we can contribute financially to it. For me, it's a huge democratic deficit, and it's something that I'm hoping that moving forward we're able to address quite significantly. Yesterday, I met with the Cabinet Secretary for Health, and I really did press the need for flexibilities within the budget setting process to allow us to set multi-year budgets, but also to perhaps look at the idea that the IGB doesn't necessarily need to provide that full balanced budget in this year. And he did agree some commitment to look at that in respect of us, but not just in respect of us. Health and social care partnerships across the country are facing this, so I'm going to be following that up with them. But I know that Joanne, as the Chief Officer, has already had those discussions too. So hopefully, if we can agree as a council that that's something and kind of back up the Health and Social Care Partnership on that, we might see some movement. And actually, I'd be quite happy to write as council leader in those terms to the Cabinet Secretary to ask for flexibilities. At the end of the day, it doesn't cost them anything. It just allows us the ability to perhaps deal with the overspend in a different way. When we look at the asks in the Health and Social Care Partnership, as Fiona has outlined as the Council's spokesperson in that area, we do not have the ability to fully fund the overspends that have been put in front of us, nor do we have the ability to fully contribute to the asks for the following financial year. So I would probably, from our perspective, say that option 3 is the option that suits our kind of financial position, but also would hopefully give the IGB some assurances on our position there. I do also agree that it has to be on a loan basis. We cannot just continually fund the partnership without seeing a way to get that funding back. I am given some assurances that a recovery plan will be put in place, and that should hopefully start to bear some fruit. And as Ewan said, without the full funding, the IGB is going to have to look at an immediate recovery plan. I think it needs to, because we just do not have the ability to fund the asks that have been put before us. So second in the paper on the basis that we believe that option 3 is the best way forward.
Thank you. The paper is now open to debate, but just probably for a moment, Bernard, I'm just going to seek clarification that what we're talking about in terms of the movement second of that paper, the administration are putting forward option B at 410 as the preferred option, and in relation to the second decision at 2.3, which is decided whether to adopt any option support 25-26, not to put forward. Okay. I'm just trying to clarify that in terms of us opening this up to debate. There are two decisions we need to take. Those decisions are at 2.2 and 2.3. One of them is to pick an option which is covered in 4.10, options A to D. The administration position is option B. And the second, on page 420, the second position from the administration is option E in relation to the second question, which is to decide whether to adopt any option support of 25-26 budget.
Right. So we're option A for the second. Is that what you're saying? No.
E.
Why does it carry on?
E for Echo, B for Bravo. So, Councillor Rennie.
Yeah, I'm still none the wiser, to be honest. 2 days ago, we got the paper. You know, obviously, I sit on the IGB. I understand the risk of the IGB of all of this. Also sit on the Audit and Risk Committee of the IGB and understand the risks of all of this. So it's really significant. But regrettably, with all that in mind, I'm sitting here on behalf of Clackmannanshire Council today, and as I say, with the short-term nature of this, but also the risks that were clear to the council, I'd be minded to support the administration's recommendations. So that's where we sit on that.
Thank you. Any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Coyne.
I'll just chuck in there on the basis that charity begins at home and pragmatism is a good belief. I think I'd go along with that.
Okay, any other contributions to debate? Councillor Law, do you want an opportunity to sum up? No. So, just make sure I get this right. The proposition of the administration in relation to 2.2, the question been asked at 2.2, is that we are going for option B for Bravo in section 410 of the report. And in relation to 2.3, we're going for option E, Echo, in relation to 25-26. Are we all agreed to that position? Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to adjourn for 50 minutes for a comfort break. Thank you.